Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to launch Jasper Report Server in a cluster configuration on Amazon AWS using a virtual private cloud that's not the default. Some of you may be familiar with our community website that has a page that you can use to launch Jasper Report Server instances on AWS using these handy links. We have several different kinds of configurations available on here. Now, these links to the CloudFormation templates that they link to are deprecated, and we are in the process of replacing these with more current editions that are currently available on the AWS Marketplace. And so when you go to the AWS Marketplace and you search for Jaspersoft, you can come over here and you can find us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate using the BYOL instance, and I'm going to go ahead and subscribe. I'm already subscribed, so I'm going to continue to the configuration. And so now what I need to do is I need to choose a fulfillment option. And so I'm going to choose CloudFormation. And I have these options for the CloudFormation template that I want to use. I'm going to choose Jaspersoft cluster using RDS for metadata. Now, I'm not actually going to launch the software this way. I'm only doing this for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to select Oregon as my region. So I continue to launch. I go to the launch action, launch CloudFormation. Okay, so this is going to take me into the CloudFormation wizard. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that if I launch the cluster this way, it's not going to give me the option to specify a virtual private cloud or VPC. If I already have a default VPC set up, then it will launch the cluster into that VPC instance. However, if I have multiple VPCs set up and I want to deploy to a specific one, I don't actually have that option using this template. So what I can do is I can go back to the deprecated template for now, and so I'm going to choose Oregon using the manual VPC option. So it takes me in here. So what I can do is I can download this template. I can launch the template in the designer, and then I have the template here. What I can do is I can copy and paste this into a file, and then I just need to edit the file. So what I did was I actually grabbed both templates. I grabbed this one from the marketplace and then this one from our community site, and I downloaded them both. And the only thing that you really need to do, the thing that I found that changed on here was the AMIs have all been updated for 6.4.3. So I just grabbed the AMI list and I pasted it into here. So this is the template that I'm actually going to use to launch the instance. Now, I'm actually starting from scratch. I don't actually have any resources deployed in my AWS environment yet. So the first thing I need to do is I need to set up my virtual private cloud. And to do that, I'm going to follow this tutorial. You can see the URL up here. Now, I'm not going to follow every step in this tutorial, and I'll explain as I go through this. But what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to go into the VPC wizard, and I'm going to actually go in here and click on VPC. And so what I do is I click on the Start VPC wizard, and I've got these options here on the left. If you look at the tutorial says to launch the VPC dashboard, start the VPC wizard, and then choose this option VPC with public and private subnets. What this does is it gives us the option of having an RDS instance in a private subnet and then having the Elastic Load Balancer and the EC2 instance in the public subnet. This is going to be a more secure way to set this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the instruction here to choose VPC with public and private subnet. So I click select. And so it populates these things for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Steve-VPC-test. And then for the availability zone, I'm going to specify 2A. And I'm going to specify 2A for this one as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and now the tutorial says if you don't already have any choices that show up here, you can create a new one. I don't think I've actually got either of these running. I think I shut them down previously. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and launch a NAT instance instead. And so the tutorial says to leave these as the default, so you choose T2 Nano and then no key pair. It also says to ignore this add entry point button, and I'm going to enable DNS host names, and I'm going to specify hardware tenancy as default. And then I come back over here and I create my VPC. So this is going to create the VPC. It's going to create some other resources, including the public and private gateway, or the public and private subnets, as well as the gateway and routing table. Okay, so my VPC has been successfully created. So you'll notice that I already have a VPC here that's the default. This is the one that it created for me just now. So now what I need to do is I'm going to come in here to the subnets and I'm going to create a second subnet. So I've got private subnet here. I'm going to call this one private subnet 1. There it goes. I just clicked the button wrong. So there's private subnet 1. So now I'm going to create a separate subnet. And the reason why I'm doing this is because when you create an RDS instance, it needs to have two subnets. So I'm going to call this one private subnet 2, and I'm going to choose my VPC test that I just created, and I'm going to go ahead and choose the availability zone of 2B this time. And then my sitter block, I'm going to choose 10.0.2.0/24. So I already have a 10.0.0.0 and a 10.0.1.0. I'm going to choose 10.0.2.0. So I click yes, create. Okay, so it created that second subnet for me. So before I get started, what I need to do is I need to create a VPC private group. So the tutorial says to create a VPC security group for a public web server. I'm actually going to skip that step because when I go ahead and launch the CloudFormation template with Jaspersoft server, it will create a security group for me, and I'll just go ahead and use that one. I will, on the other hand, create a security group for the private Amazon RDS instance that I'm about to create. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go into the VPC security group. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go into the VPC security group, and I'm going to come in here to security groups, and thanks for all of them. So Steve RDS SSG, and then I'm going to choose my VPC. I click yes, create. Okay, so now the next step says to create or to add inbound rules to the security group. I'm actually going to skip this step for now, but I'm going to come back to it because when I create my, or when I launch the template, the CloudFormation template to create my EC2 and Elastic Load Balancer instances, it'll create the security group for me that I'll need to set these on. So now I'm going to do is the last step of the tutorial, which is to create a DB subnet group. So I click on Services RDS, and then I go to Subnet Groups. I actually have one left over from last time, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new subnet group. And I'll just copy this over. I'm going to choose my VPC, and I'm going to click on Add All Subnets related to this VPC, which will give me all three. Right, so I click on Create. Okay, so there's my RDS subnet group. All right, so now I go back, and then I click on Get Started Now. I click on Postgres, click Next, and I'm going to click on Dev Test. And I'm going to choose M3 Medium as my instance type. I'm going to leave it multi-AZ off, and I'm going to give it a name. Master username will be dbadmin, and then the password. All right, so click Next. In the advanced settings, I'm going to choose my VPC. I'm going to choose my subnet group, and I'm going to leave public accessibility off. and I'm going to specify 2A as my availability zone, and I'm going to choose my existing VPC group that I just created. And then for my options for database name, I'm going to go ahead and specify Jasper Server. Now later on in this step, I'm going to run a script that's actually going to populate the Jasper Server database as well as the FoodMart and Sugar CRM databases. So this actually isn't really necessary, but I'll go ahead and I'll do it anyway. It'll just get blown away and restarted later. So I'm going to accept the defaults for encryption, backup, and monitoring and maintenance. And I'll go ahead and launch my DB instance. All right, so I'm going to need to give that about a minute or so to launch. Okay, so now we've got our RDS launched. So the next step will be to go into the CloudFormation template and launch the stack. Before I do that, I'm going to do one thing really quick. I'm going to go back to the VPC and I'm going to set a property on my public subnet. So one thing to keep in mind with the CloudFormation template that I'm going to use is that it only provides one subnet. It only provides the ability to specify one subnet. And so I'm going to specify the public subnet for both my for my load balancer and my EC2 instances. And the implications there are I need to change this public subnet to automatically assign public IPs. And you'll see why in a little bit. One implication about this is that by doing so, I'm going to assign public IPs to both my Elastic Load Balancer and my EC2 instances, which might not be the most secure way to do it. The chances of somebody successfully guessing an IP or the DNS name for the EC2 instances is pretty remote. But if you're absolutely paranoid about it, my suggestion would probably be to modify the CloudFormation template and specify and give it the ability to specify two subnets. So that way you could put your Elastic Load Balancer in the public subnet and the EC2 instances in the private subnet, and then set up some sort of a VPN, or not VPN, but a NAT connection between them. All right, so let me go to the stack. Before I do that, let me go back to the RDS. You'll see why in a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the CloudFormation in a new tab. Okay, so I'm going to create a new stack and I'm going to specify my template. Right, I click next, and then I'm going to give my stack a name. And now I have to get the host name. So I have to get the complete endpoint from this RDS test. So I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to copy and paste it. And then I'm going to specify my DB user, which is DB admin, and my password. And then I'm going to specify my key pair. I'm going to specify my VPC, the one that I've created specifically for this. And then I'm going to specify the public subnet. I'm also going to leave this default of enable public IP set to true. And then I'm going to assign my secure IP. And then I'm going to set my operator email. I click next, set the defaults on this screen, click next again, check this box to acknowledge that I'm creating IAM resources, and then click create, and this will go ahead and launch my stack. Now this will take a few minutes to launch, so I'm going to pause the recording for a little bit and then I'll come back after this is done. Okay, so now the stack is done. So before I do anything else, I need to go back to the tutorial. So you'll remember on this last step, I created a DB subnet group, and I did not apply any security rules between the security group for the RDS and the security group for EC2, because the security group for EC2 is going to be created as part of the stack creation. So now what I need to do is I need to go to EC2 and I need to find the security group that was created. So the security group that was created is this one. It says the description is for Jaspersoft BI. All right, so now what I need to do is I need to go to this inbound group, or sorry, I need to go to the this other one, and I'm going to create a rule that's going to allow the connection on port 5432, which is the PostgreSQL port, to my security group for Jasper server. Okay, so now I can access one from the other. This is going to be critical because the EC2 instance needs to be able to communicate with the RDS instance because that's where the repository database is. So now that I've got my EC2 instance, I need to go back to it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in using SSH to the EC2 instance. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to copy this public DNS to my clipboard, and then I'm going to log in using SSH. All right, so what I'm doing next is I'm going to follow the instructions in the documentation. So I go to community.jaspersoft.com and I click on the Docs tab. All right, and then I look for the Jaspersoft for AWS user guide. It's right here. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into section 2.4.6 and specifically section 2.4.6.1 because this talks about manually setting up the RDS database with my repository. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in to SSH, and then I need to run this, I need to change to this directory here, and then I need to run this script. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So cd Now I need to run this script as super user, or as root rather, so I'm going to do sudo and then this script takes a parameter. There's two parameter values I could pass in. One of them is normal, the other one is minimal. Normal creates the Jasper Report Server repository database as well as the Sugar CRM and Food Mart databases. I'm going to do that because I want to use it for use the sample reports for testing. So I specify normal. If I was going to set this up in a production environment, I would specify minimal because I wouldn't want the sample databases in that case. So let me go ahead and run this. Okay, so it's saying Jasper server already exists, drop it and create new. Yes, because it's empty. So now it's going to go through and it's going to populate the repository database as well as the Sugar CRM and Food Mart databases. This is going to take a few minutes, so I'm going to pause the recording again and I'll come back. Okay, so the script just finished. So now what we're going to do next, you'll notice that the step here says to run sudo and then halt. The reason why we do this is, let me go back to the EC2 console for a second. This instance that we have here was specifically launched for the purpose of populating the RDS database. It's not actually meant to be one of the regular instances that you would use for running Jasper Report Server. So we're going to shut it down and then we'll come back. So let me go ahead and run sudo halt-p. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. So while that's running, I'm going to go over to the autoscaling group. So the script, it allows you to specify the number of max instances, but the min instances is set to 0. So I need to change that. So I'm going to come in here to edit, and I'm going to set the minimum and the desired to be 1. So when I do that, what will happen is it'll automatically create a new instance and launch it. All right, so let me go ahead and save this. And now when we go back to the EC2 dashboard, we should see in a few moments the new instance be created. And this will take a few minutes to run this, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording one more time. Okay, so now my instance is up and running. There's one more thing that I need to do. The script created the load balancer and it put it in the wrong security group. So I need to go back and fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here and I'm going to click edit. So I'm going to click edit security groups. And I'm going to assign it to this one, which is the one for my Jaspersoft BI. So I click save, and now I can go and launch the stack from my browser. So I go to CloudFormation, click on VPC test, and then I click on outputs, and now I can go ahead and I can click on this getting started link, which takes me to the Jaspersoft web page. And now I can go to the license. You'll notice that the license will expire in 3 days. So what I need to do is I need to go to the S3 that was created for this, and I need to upload my license file. So the way I do that is I go over here to stack detail, and I go over here to resource, or go here to S3 license bucket. So this is the bucket that was created in order to hold the license file. So what I do is I go over here to services S3, and I come over here to my bucket. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and upload my license file. So I click add files, and then I go to my license file. And then I'm just going to accept all the defaults on the next couple of screens. And so now I've got my license up, and so I would need to restart the instance or start a new instance for the license to take effect. So one last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate a load on the server in order to force an auto-scaling event. Okay, so one more thing that I need to do before I leave here is I need to change the timeout on the load balancer. So the default timeout on the load balancer is 60 seconds, and that might cause things to time out before they're ready. So I'm going to extend this by adding another 0 on the end of it. Okay, so the way I'm going to force the load is I'm going to use JMeter. And so if you go to our source code, the Jasper Report Server source code, if you download that and you go into the Jasper Server Pro folder, there's a folder underneath that called Performance Tests. And in that there's a script called run-adhoc-view.jmx. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this script and I'm going to modify it. This script is out of date, and there's a few things that have changed with it. So let me come in here and I'm going to open the run ad hoc view. So I'm going to change a few things in order to make the script work. First thing I do is I go into the run ad hoc view. Now we don't have an ad hoc view executions in the REST API anymore, so I'm going to change that to report executions. And I'm going to change this ad hoc view URI to report unit URI. And I'm going to change this report. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run a report that is based on an ad hoc view. So let me go ahead and log in. Okay, so I'm going to go to the repository. And the report that I'm going to run is the sales per city report. This is a report that is based on an ad hoc view. The idea behind this is I want to generate some CPU load in order to force an auto-scaling event. So running an ad hoc view and running a report should generate the amount of load that I'm looking for. So I'm going to copy this path. And then I'm going to go into JMeter. And then I'm going to paste this path, this report URI in here. And then I need to add one more parameters, and that's the output format. And I'm going to set that to PDF. All right, now I need to make a few other changes as well. What I need to do is I need to come in here and I need to set the request default. So it's currently set to localhost, so I need to change that to my load balancer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to copy and paste this. And I'm going to get rid of the slash and the HTTP in the front. And I'm going to change the port to port 80. And I'm going to set the implementation type as HTTP client 4. All right, now one other thing that I need to do is I need to change the authentication. So I'm going to use this here. And I'm going to put in my password. Okay, so one last thing that I need to do here is I need to change the number of users and threads that will be going. So I'm going to change this to 100, and I'm going to set the ramp up period to be 10 seconds, and I'm going to set this loop count to be 2. All right, so this should be ready to go. So let me go ahead and fire this off. And while this is going, I can actually monitor the system in near real time and see how it's doing load-wise. So I come over here to the EC2 dashboard, and then I go down to the instance. So let's see, make sure that I'm grabbing the right one. There's my instance, and so I go over here to monitoring, and I can watch the CPU utilization. Now I need to get the CPU utilization above 40%. All right, so there is the new instance that's spinning up. And so if I wanted to, I could log directly into it. But if I go in through the load balancer, it shouldn't matter which one of these instances I'm hitting. So that's it.